I never thought I'd be sitting here, heart pounding against my ribs, wondering if I've just destroyed my entire family, or finally saved myself from a golden cage that was slowly suffocating the life out of me. My 3 older brothers are currently pounding on my door, screaming that I'm ungrateful, while my father sits in the living room refusing to look at me. All because I decided that at 23 years old, I should be allowed to choose who I love without a background check, a GPS tracker, and a literal interrogation room set up. They think they're protecting me, but what they did last night, the way they systematically dismantled the life of the only man who ever saw me as a person and not just the little sister, is something I can never forgive. I'm looking at the packed suitcases on my bed and the restraining order papers in my hand, and I have to ask you all honestly, before I lose my mind. Was I wrong for choosing a stranger over the blood brothers who claim they'd die for me? Or is their protection actually just a form of emotional domestic abuse that I needed to escape? Tell me, would you stay and keep playing the role of the fragile princess? Or would you burn the whole kingdom down to finally take a breath of fresh air? To understand how we got to this explosion, you have to understand the dynamic of the Miller household. I am the youngest by 7 years. My brothers, Liam, Noah, and Ethan, aren't just older. They are physical giants who have spent their entire lives treating me like a piece of fine china that might shatter if a breeze hits it too hard. Growing up, I didn't have big brothers in the normal sense. I had 3 additional fathers who were younger, faster, and much more paranoid. When I was in middle school, Liam followed me to my first mixer and stood by the punch bowl the entire time, staring down any boy who even looked in my direction. In high school, Noah hacked into my social media accounts for my safety, and Ethan once physically intimidated my prom date so badly the poor guy dropped me off 30 minutes early and blocked my number before he even got home. They told me it was because the world was dangerous, because men were predators, and because I was too sweet and naive to see the real intentions of anyone outside our circle. My parents didn't stop them. In fact, my dad encouraged it, often saying he could sleep better at night knowing his boys were keeping his little girl safe. I felt loved, sure, but I also felt like a prisoner in a very expensive, very comfortable cell. This wasn't just about boys, though. It was about every decision I made. If I wanted to join the debate team, Liam had to approve the coach. If I wanted to go to an out-of-state college, Noah would find scary statistics about the city until my parents forced me to stay local. I remember once, when I was 16, I tried to get a part-time job at a local bakery. I wanted a sense of independence, a way to earn my own money, so I wouldn't have to ask my brothers for a ride or an allowance. I worked there for exactly 3 days before the owner called me into his office, looking pale and nervous. He told me he was letting me go because he couldn't afford the insurance. Years later, I found out Ethan had gone into the shop and told the owner that if anything happened to me on his watch, if I even burnt a finger on an oven, he would personally see to it that the bakery was closed down by the end of the week. That was my life. Every time I tried to plant a seed of independence, they paved over it with concrete and called it security. I spent years thinking this was normal, that this was what a good family looked like. I saw my friends struggling with neglectful parents or distant siblings, and I told myself I was lucky. But luck isn't being unable to breathe without permission. Luck isn't having your privacy treated like a communal property. By the time I graduated college and landed a job in graphic design, I thought things would change. I moved into my own apartment, or at least I thought it was mine until I realized my brothers had vetted the landlord, installed the security system themselves, and kept copies of the keys, just in case of an emergency. I tried to date, but it was impossible. Every time I met someone, my brothers would find out. I don't know if they were tracking my phone or if they had friends watching me, but within 48 hours of a first date, that guy would suddenly lose interest. It wasn't until I met Leo that I realized just how deep the rot went. Leo didn't care about their intimidation. He was kind, a high school history teacher who spent his weekends volunteering at animal shelters. He treated me with a level of respect I'd never experienced. He asked for my opinion, he listened to my dreams, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the little sister. I felt like a woman. We kept it a secret for 4 months. 4 months of bliss, of meeting in quiet cafes 3 towns over, of deleting texts, of feeling like a real person. But secrets don't last in my family. I had to learn the art of the lie. I told my brothers I was taking extra shifts at the studio. I told my parents I was staying in to focus on my portfolio. In reality, I was experiencing a life I never knew existed. Leo took me to art galleries where we'd debate the meaning of a single brushstroke for hours. He taught me how to drive on the highway, something my brothers refused to let me do because they thought I was too distracted for high speeds. With Leo, the world felt vast and full of color. With my brothers, it was a gray box. I started noticing things I never noticed before, like the way Noah would check my odometer whenever I came over for dinner, or the way Liam would accidentally drop by my apartment at 11 p.m. just to see if I was alone. I felt like a criminal for wanting a basic human connection. The stress of the double life started to wear me down. I lost weight, I couldn't sleep, and I was constantly checking my rearview mirror. Leo noticed. He told me that this wasn't healthy, that I shouldn't have to live in fear of the people who were supposed to love me. He encouraged me to come clean, to stand my ground. He believed in the goodness of people. He thought that if I just sat them down and explained how happy I was, they would understand. I knew better, but I wanted to believe he was right. I wanted to believe my family loved me more than they loved their control. Last week, Ethan saw us. We were walking through a park, and I made the mistake of leaning my head on Leo's shoulder. I saw Ethan's black truck pull over across the street, and my heart sank into my stomach. I knew the clock was ticking. I tried to warn Leo, telling him my brothers were a bit much. But he laughed it off, saying he dealt with rowdy teenagers all day and could handle a few overprotective siblings. He had no idea what he was dealing with. My brothers don't just talk, they destroy. Within 24 hours, they hadn't just looked up Leo's records. They had called his principal, claiming they had evidence of inappropriate conduct involving a former student. A complete and utter lie they fabricated using some old photos they found of him at a graduation party. They went to his apartment while I was at work and told him that if he didn't leave town, they would make sure he never worked in education again. They told him I was unstable, and that I was going through a phase, and didn't actually love him. They treated my heart like a clerical error they could just erase. They didn't stop at his job. They started calling his family, telling his elderly mother that her son was in deep legal trouble, and that she needed to convince him to move back home or face the consequences. I remember coming home to a frantic, sobbing voicemail from Leo, explaining that he couldn't do this anymore, that the pressure was too much, and that my family was terrifying. Imagine that. The person who makes you feel safest in the world is being hunted by the people who share your last name. I spent that night on the floor of my bathroom, clutching my phone and wondering how my life had become a psychological thriller. I realized then that my brothers didn't love me. They loved the idea of controlling me. They loved the power they held over my happiness. Every dinner we had together, every holiday, every protective gesture was just another brick in the wall they built around my life. I started looking back at all the accidents that happened to my previous friends. The girl who stopped talking to me in 10th grade? Liam had threatened her brother. The internship I lost in college? Noah had called the firm and told them I was taking a family leave I never requested. They had been editing my life like a movie script for years, cutting out any character they didn't like. I felt a cold, hard resolve settle in my chest. If they wanted to play God with my life, I was going to show them that I was the one who controlled the universe they lived in. I began documenting everything. I used a hidden app on my phone to record every conversation. I saved every threatening text they sent Leo. I even went to the security company for my apartment and discovered that Noah had been logging into my camera feed from his own laptop. The violation was absolute. I felt like I was being watched by ghosts in my own home. I spent the next 3 days in a state of hyper-focus, gathering evidence like a prosecutor preparing for the trial of a lifetime. I contacted the principal at Leo's school and gave him the truth, backed up by audio of Ethan bragging about getting that teacher fired. The principal was horrified. He told me he'd had a feeling something was off but didn't want to get involved in family drama. I told him it wasn't drama, it was a crime. I also went to the local precinct and spoke with an officer about the digital stalking. They told me that because the apartment was technically co-signed by my brothers, it was a civil matter, but they took a report anyway. Every step I took away from their influence felt like pulling my feet out of deep mud. It was exhausting, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. I knew that once I started this, there was no going back. I couldn't go back to being the little sister who smiled and nodded while her life was being dismantled. I was preparing for war. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. I was standing in the middle of my living room, watching my 3 brothers high-five each other because they had handled the threat, while I felt like I was literally dying inside. They had ruined a good man's reputation and terrified the person I loved, all while smiling and telling me they were doing me a favor. Before I tell you what happened next, the way I finally broke the cycle and the scorched earth policy I adopted, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have stayed quiet to keep the family peace? Or would you have risked losing everything to stand up for yourself? Let me know, because at that moment, I felt like the villain of my own story. The silence in the room after they told me what they did was deafening. Liam actually had the nerve to pat my head and say, "Don't worry, princess. We found a much better guy for you to meet. Someone from the gym who actually knows how to protect a woman." That was the moment something snapped. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just walked to my kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and threw it directly into Liam's face. The shock on their faces would have been funny if the situation weren't so tragic. I told them to get out. When they refused, saying it was their apartment because they paid the security fee, I called the police. Right there in front of them. I told the operator there were 3 men in my home refusing to leave, and I felt threatened. They couldn't believe it. They left before the cops arrived, calling me crazy and emotional. But they didn't realize that the little girl was gone. That night, I went to Leo's. He was a mess. He was packing his things, terrified that his career was over before it really started. I sat him down and showed him every recording I'd secretly made of my brothers over the years. The times they'd admitted to scaring off guys, the times they bragged about tracking me. We went to a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a family law specialist who handled harassment. I filed for a permanent restraining order against all 3 of them. I also helped Leo file a defamation suit. When the papers were served at my parents' house during Sunday dinner, the fallout was nuclear. My dad called me a traitor. My mom cried and said I was breaking her heart. My brothers tried to come to my office, but since I'd already alerted security and shown them the police reports, they were escorted off the premises in handcuffs for trespassing. It was the most humiliating day of their lives, and for the first time in 23 years, I felt powerful. But the power came with a heavy price. The following weeks were a blur of court dates, police statements, and endless, hateful messages from extended family members. My aunts and uncles, people I hadn't spoken to in years, were suddenly calling to tell me that I was destroying the Miller name. They told me that brothers are supposed to be protective, and that I was being dramatic. It's funny how people who don't have to live under a microscope are the first ones to tell you how to adjust the lens. I had to change my route to work every day. I had to install a whole new security system that only I had the codes to. I lived in a state of constant vigilance, the very thing my brothers claimed they were protecting me from. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was now truly in danger, but the danger was coming from the people who shared my childhood memories. I remember sitting in the courtroom, looking at Liam, Noah, and Ethan sitting across from me. They didn't look like the heroes they thought they were. They looked like small, angry men who couldn't handle the fact that they no longer had a puppet to play with. When the judge granted the final restraining order, the air in the room felt different. It felt lighter. I watched them be let out, and for a split second, I felt a pang of sadness for the relationship we could have had if they had just treated me like an equal. But that sadness was quickly replaced by the memory of Leo's face when he thought his life was over. I chose the man who built me up over the men who tried to keep me down. To make matters worse, my brothers tried to play the victim in the local community. They went to our church, they went to our old neighborhood spots, telling everyone that I had been brainwashed by a manipulative older man. They tried to frame my legal actions as a mental health crisis. They even tried to petition for a $5,150 psychiatric hold on me, claiming I was a danger to myself because I was cutting off my entire support system. Thankfully, the lawyer I hired was a shark. She had already prepared for this, documenting their previous attempts at control. When the judge saw the history of GPS tracking and the hacked social media accounts, he didn't just give me the restraining order. He lectured my brothers on the record about the definition of harassment. He told them that their protection looked a lot like stalking. Watching Liam's face turn beet red as a judge scolded him in front of a full gallery was the closure I didn't know I needed. My father still tried to intervene, sending me long, handwritten letters about how his sons were men of honor, who only wanted what was best for me. He wrote that one day, when I was older and had my own children, I would understand. I wrote back one last time. I told him that if I ever have a daughter, I will teach her that her value isn't tied to how many men are watching her. I will teach her that love is a partnership, not a surveillance state. I told him that by supporting his son's behavior, he didn't protect me, he lost me. The aftermath has been a nightmare, honestly. I've lost my family. My parents have essentially disowned me for suing my own blood. And my brothers are facing legal consequences that might actually stick this time. Leo and I are trying to rebuild, but the shadow of their protection still looms over us. I've moved to a different city, one they don't have keys to, and I've changed my number. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night thinking I hear Liam's truck in the driveway, and I realize that the protection they gave me was actually just a long-term trauma I'm going to be processing for years. But I'm free. I'm finally truly free. I've learned that family isn't about who shares your DNA. It's about who respects your boundaries and sees you as a whole human being capable of making your own choices. They wanted to keep me a child forever, so I had to leave them behind to finally grow up. My life now is quiet, and honestly, quiet is the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. I go to the grocery store without checking over my shoulder. I talk to my neighbors without wondering if they've been vetted. Leo and I are taking it slow, healing from the wreckage my family left behind. He got his job back, by the way. The school board issued a public apology after the evidence of my brother's lies came to light. It wasn't just a win for us, it was a win for the truth. I still get the occasional email from a burner account, Noah trying to tell me he forgives me, or Ethan claiming he's worried about my mental health. I delete them without reading. Their concern is just another hook they try to sink into my skin, and I'm done being their catch. I've started going to therapy to unlearn the behaviors I developed just to survive my house. I'm learning that it's okay to have secrets. It's okay to say no. It's okay to exist without being watched. Every day is a small victory. Every decision I make, from what I eat for breakfast to where I want to go on vacation, is mine and mine alone. It's a strange feeling, being the captain of your own ship after 23 years of being a passenger in someone else's, but I wouldn't trade this uncertainty for their certainty ever again. Leo and I are planning a trip soon, somewhere far away where the air smells like salt and nobody knows the Miller name. I'm looking forward to standing on a beach, feeling the wind, and knowing that for the first time in my life, I am exactly where I chose to be. I know some people will say I went too far, that I should have just talked to them one more time or tried to go to therapy together. But you can't reason with people who think they own you. I chose myself, and I chose the person who actually loves me for who I am, not who he wants me to be. If you've ever felt controlled or smothered by the people who are supposed to love you most, please know that it's okay to walk away. You aren't a traitor for wanting a life of your own. Your life is yours to live, yours to ruin, and yours to celebrate. Don't let anyone, not even your own blood, tell you otherwise. Like this video if you were on my side and think I did the right thing by calling the police and filing those orders. Subscribe for more stories like this, because I know I'm not the only one dealing with overprotective family members who don't know where the line is. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I destroy my family, or did they destroy themselves the moment they decided I wasn't allowed to be an adult? I'll see you all in the next story. Would you have done the same? Would you have stayed? Let's talk about it. Until next time, stay safe and keep your boundaries strong. I'll see you all in the next story.